It's been almost 11 years since this masterpiece right here released.
You were at my side all along.
And all these years later, we're not far from the PS6 generation, and everyone continues to ask every PlayStation state of play in their comment sections. They could be posting about anything. They could be posting about Sackboy, and people are going to be in the comments being like, Bloodborne 2, Bloodborne Remaster, when? And nothing. Absolute silence from Sony regarding this property. And I want to take a different approach than I think a lot of other people have discussed, which is the FromSoft side of the situation. Because while Sony does own the IP, they own the property, yes, and they have licensed the property to uh, comic books, merchandise, things like that, they've still done nothing with the game proper. There's been no remaster, there's been no sequel, and there's been no remake, which I'm going to get into that as well. But what do I think is going on here? Well, we as far as we know, there's been no real like beef between FromSoft and Sony since the Demon Souls days. As far as I'm aware, the production of that game went very smoothly. There was no issues there. That game came out, everyone was happy. Maybe Sony wasn't super happy with its performance at launch, but over the years, it has continued to sell well, largely because of the success of Dark Souls, Elden Ring, and all the other Souls games as well. Even, I'm sure Sekiro feeds into that to a certain extent. So it begs the question, Sony's been remastering everything. They're putting out remasters and remakes of like Until Dawn, Days Gone, like games that one were perfectly fine at launch and ran perfectly fine on the PS5, but for some reason getting, $70, $60 remasters. Bloodborne, one of their most requested titles to do anything with, absolutely anything with. They've stayed silent on it, done nothing with it. So that brings me to the question why that, everyone continues to ask. Is it because Sony just doesn't like the property? What is it? I think it really kind of comes down to a couple different factors also involving FromSoft. I believe that there was probably some sort of gentleman's agreement between the two companies that there would be no game uh anything, any game development, any game remaster, anything of that without the involvement of FromSoft. Now, we do know Miyazaki himself has said, hey, we're open to a remaster, but that's kind of on Sony. What's the disconnect there? Has there been an official reaching out from FromSoft to Sony to do that? We have no idea, obviously. But I do think something that's very obvious with the way FromSoft has continued to kind of carry themselves over the past couple years is they're very forward focused. They're not looking back a lot. Now, we have had remasters of Dark Souls 1, Dark Souls 2. Those were done by Havoc, but FromSoft themselves have not remastered that game. And while I guess, Sony could put a company like Bluepoint on that remaster, how much of that needs to go through FromSoft as well? We just don't know. But I do think when it comes to FromSoft themselves, how much are they willing to allocate resources away from their current developments, their current projects, like the Dustbloods that's coming out hopefully sometime this year, and, whatever else they have in production. We know there's at least one other title that they're working on that's yet to be announced that will hopefully come out this year. But all of that being said, how much are they willing to divert from all of that to put those resources into a particular, a remaster? Again, could Sony get Bluepoint to do that? Possibly. How much would they have to work with FromSoft on that? We have no idea. But I get the feeling that there's something there that we don't fully understand as to why Sony hasn't done anything as far as a remaster of Bloodborne. Could it involve the closure of Japan studios as well? I have no idea, but I imagine there would have to be some kind of like communication between the two companies, some kind of deliberate reaching out between either Sony to FromSoft, FromSoft to Sony, not Miyazaki out there saying, "Oh, we're open to it," but there's no actual movement behind it. I think there needs to be some kind of discussion between the two companies to start that discussion of, "Hey, let's allocate, this small team to put out a 60 FPS 4K remaster, upgrade to the game, either sell it as a full game or as a $10 upgrade to the already existing PS4 game and put it out there. And I do think that this, out of the three things I'm going to talk about here, which the other two being a sequel and then a full on like remake, I think is the easiest for them to do and is the one that's the most baffling why it hasn't happened, because I do think the other two do require more oversight by FromSoft. But again, has there been a deliberate movement in that direction? We don't know. But I do get the sense that FromSoft has to be much more involved in that process than they were with Demon Souls, which was nothing. Which leads me to the sequel. Why was there never a Bloodborne sequel? People continue to ask for it today. They're like, okay, when Bloodborne 2, Bloodborne 2. And they kind of point the finger at Sony. They're like, they could be giving us Bloodborne 2. Instead, they're giving us Concord, whatever. This is all predicated under the assumption that FromSoft would divert, again, as I said before, would they divert their resources from whatever forward-moving projects they have that they all own going forward. All of their IPs going forward, they have full creative control over, towards an IP that they don't fully own, that's owned by Sony, that they'd have oversight over, potentially. And, would Miyazaki himself say, okay, this new game with new mechanics that I'm very passionate about, do I want to divert from potentially doing that and spend another 4-5 years working on Bloodborne 2, whatever that looks like? And I have my, what does that even look like narratively? I have no idea. But is that something he would even consider? Would if today Sony came to FromSoft, came to Miyazaki himself, they said, we want to do Bloodborne 2. Are you on board? I don't think they would say yes. I think they would say, we are very busy. Our hands are tied. We're working on multiple projects right now. And, maybe there's a discussion about revisiting it in the future. But as of right now, we've got 3 projects already in the pipeline, let's say hypothetically, that will, be releasing over the next couple of years. We're not interested in diverting our attention from that into a Bloodborne 2. And I think that's where, why there never was a Bloodborne 2, because I don't think there was ever an interest from FromSoft to do it. I think today, given the state of FromSoft, how big they are, how influential they are, if they came to Sony and said, we want to make Bloodborne 2 right now, I think Sony would say, go for it. Do what you want. Go for it. And I think they would let them. And I think one of the reasons they haven't done anything with the property, again, game-wise, is because there is some kind of gentleman's agreement, maybe even something written in stone, saying that Sony cannot make a sequel, cannot do a remake, anything with this game, unless FromSoft is involved, unless Miyazaki is involved. And I think that is for the best for the game. I would rather the game stay where it is right now than getting a Blue Point remake or a sequel done by a completely different studio that is, Sony works with, that completely misses the entire point of what the original game was about. And it's like, oh, let's, ape the combat system, that kind of thing, and it's just something completely different. Do we even want that? Do we want another company touching a FromSoft property? I think that would be absolutely horrendous. And which leads me into number 3, the remake. I am so tired. I need people to stop commenting Bloodborne remake when. Number 1, this game came out in 2015. Yeah, that's over a decade ago. You know what also came out a decade ago? Dark Souls 3. I've not seen a single individual say, we need a remake of Dark Souls 3. You know why? Because it's a perfectly fine game that runs at 60 FPS at 4K. The only reason people say that is because, 1, they did it with Demon Souls, and 2, because Bloodborne is in a state of stuck at 30 FPS, 1080p. If that was not the case, I don't think you would see those people asking for it. But my greatest fear is that I'm wrong, and that there isn't this gentleman's agreement that I'm kind of thinking may potentially be there. And because it's largely speculative, but it just feels like that, or there's something contractual there that is prohibiting Sony from doing anything with the property other than licensing it for products, licensing it for the comic books, whatever. We're still getting products. We're still getting comic books. Like, we're getting statues and plushies and, you name it. Like, they're still putting out, we're getting a record release this year, officially labeled for the 10th anniversary. But we've seen nothing for the game or a potential sequel or anything like that. People being like, we want a Bloodborne remake from Bluepoint has got to be the most brain dead take I've ever heard. Look, am I, the world's biggest original Demon Souls fan? No, I've never played it. But I have played the Demon Souls remake, or at least parts of it, and I will say I don't like how it feels. It doesn't feel like a FromSoft game. It doesn't look like a FromSoft game. And as someone who didn't play the original, I can still tell that this is not FromSoft. Beyond even the art direction, just the way the game plays, the way it feels, it doesn't feel like a FromSoft game. And the concept, the idea of that being translated into a Bloodborne remake sends shivers down my spine. I've said this on my TikTok. I've said this in posts. I would rather this game be locked at 30 FPS, 1080p for all of eternity, locked in the nightmare of Mensis forever, than to get a Bluepoint remake that completely destroys the art direction and the combat system and feels completely different. Maybe that's a bold take. Maybe that's a crazy thing to say, but I've seen other people espouse similar opinions, and I think more people need to be out there saying, hey, this is actually not what we want. We just want a remaster. And I think some people get those confused in their head. They're like, remake, remaster, I think that some people, it's an honest mistake. I think there are some people who do genuinely want a remake, and it blows my mind because how many other games from 2015 are people out there saying, we want a remake of? None. I can't think of a single one. Like, are we out here saying, oh, we want a remake of The Witcher 3? We want a remake of Fallout 4. We want a remake of, I just finished Metal Gear 5. We want a remake of that. Not a single person is out there saying that. Bloodborne, yes. FromSoft games have always been half or a full generation behind, graphically at times. But I think they've played well into it. They've utilized their art direction so incredibly well, given their limitations with what they have. But yeah, even a game like Elden Ring is, if you're nitpicking, if you're looking at, textures and things like that, yeah, it's not the most impressive. But where that game shines is its art direction and what it does with what it has. It's absolutely stunning. One of the few games that leaves me absolutely jaw-dropped. Bloodborne is similar, just a little bit older. Again, graphically, it's almost identical to Dark Souls 3, and no one's asking for that, but we're out here asking for Bloodborne remake. Blows my mind. I don't understand that logic to me. It just doesn't make sense. I think that would be an awful direction. And I would hope and pray that this, hypothetical, potential agreement between FromSoft and Sony that they wouldn't proceed with any other games outside of FromSoft is true, because I would not want them to do a Bluepoint remake, which, as far as we're aware, is not the case. Whatever Bluepoint's working on, it doesn't sound like it's Bloodborne. I'm putting my bets on a God of War something. If FromSoft could get involved, work with Sony, get that Bloodborne remaster out the door, maybe by the time the PS6 comes out, who knows? That would be, in my opinion, the best case scenario for this game, for this IP. And then I'm ready to move on. FromSoft, give me the Duskbloods, give me whatever else you're working on. Something I appreciate about them is pretty much post Dark Souls 3, they've been largely focused on new IPs. I mean, yeah, we had Night Rain, but it's also, people say it's glorified DLC. It's very much its own game, but it's, kind of a quick thing that they kind of put out the door. Sometimes it shows, but I do really like that game. But outside of that, and like Armored Core 6, I mean, we had Sekiro, we had Elden Ring, and we have the Duskbloods coming up. All brand new IPs coming, have already come out or are coming soon. And I would imagine if they're not doing a Dark Souls 3 remaster, then they are working on hopefully either a new IP or another, Armored Core game, which Armored Core 6, very good. I would highly recommend that game if you've never played it. I cannot recommend Armored Core 6 enough. It's so good. I need to go back and start my platinum run on that. Anyway, those are kind of my thoughts on like the current state of Bloodborne. Again, we're approaching 11 years with this game since it was released. No word on a remaster. I do kind of think that there is something there that is prohibiting Sony from moving forward with the IP when they've milked almost everything that they have. And this one game that I know their social media team is tired of seeing in their comments that they've done nothing with. There's got to be something. There's something. I don't believe the whole, oh, they deleted the game, they lost the original source code. I don't believe that. I think FromSoft probably has that. And I would imagine Sony probably has a copy of it. I think they both probably have something. But I do think there's something there. And my speculation is that they need FromSoft to move forward with this game. And FromSoft has either not reached out to them, they've not reached out to FromSoft, and there just hasn't been this, mending of ways. When I think, especially now, given the current state of FromSoft, if they came knocking on Sony's door, these are the guys who won Game of the Year twice, put out Elden Ring, arguably the game, this generation's defining game, and said, we want to do something with Bloodborne, I think they would let them. I genuinely do. Because what's the worst that happens? They put out a game that's critically acclaimed, a remaster of a game that's critically acclaimed, and they make even more money. Why would you say no to that? I mean, to be fair, this is Sony, but it would blow my mind if that was the case, that they said, no, we actually don't, like they approached them and said, we want to do something. And then Sony said, no, we're not going to, we don't want to do that. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm completely wrong. But I feel like this is a slightly more reasonable take than what I often see, which is Sony never did Bloodborne 2, which why would you want them to do it without FromSoft? And Sony's not doing a remaster, which, yeah, I will agree there. Why have we not seen a remaster? But maybe there is something there with FromSoft. And why have they not done a remake? Again, do we want another studio to remake a FromSoft game when we've already seen what they've done in the past? Let's not do it, gang. Let's not do it. But anyway, if you've liked this video, be sure to subscribe, like the video, go follow the TikTok. I post a lot on there as well. A lot of this I've already talked about on there, but I'm liking this like longer form content as well. So anyway, I will catch you guys next time.